Mr. Ed Barrasett.
Yeah, I've got a question for both of you. The question is, let's say a magic wand is waved and these things are complete and they exist. How will we know that those have been successful? And then the other part of that is internally when we do product testing, for example, we have a database of all the various tests that are done, and then also how many times that test has been successful at finding something wrong. Tests that we find are not productive, they don't find bugs, get tossed overboard because they're a waste of time. And I wanted to know if there's a similar process, and if so, what is that for the certifications and for the testing that you are describing?
I don't know. No, that really has not been defined yet. How to define success, just with any cybersecurity testing, if with my pen test I didn't compromise the device, I wasn't able to put a footprint someplace, doesn't necessarily mean that the whole environment's secure. With a vulnerability test or just doing a compliance test doesn't necessarily mean I'm secure. So defining success right now is going to have to be turned into a level of risk acceptance more than I've passed this test, but am I still willing to accept the risk of I didn't test from end to end? I tested these components, these embedded systems, but I haven't tested an end to end. So defining, just because I passed a test, am I secure? Yes, I have that stamp of approval, but I know my own question is, did you turn over every rock? Did I give it to, my guy in the corner here that might pull something out of his hat and do that negative test? So the success, no, has not been defined. And by continuing to find errors, though, in the testing, kind of builds on the negative testing of how we can continue to improve the product. Just because a test fails doesn't necessarily mean that it's a big vulnerability. It would definitely mean that there's a product improvement, but is that small vulnerability going to compromise a whole enterprise power system environment? And looking at that from a global perspective has not been defined or even looked at this standpoint yet. So it's still an I don't know and an unknown right now.
The measurement of, we're still in an art and a science. This is discipline, combines the two almost on a daily basis. And metrics is, when I work with lots of PhDs, and I don't know if anyone knows Miles McQueen, but he's just in search of the metrics, and I really admire that. But it is so difficult. And once you get the metrics, the key to metrics is what value does that metrics have, and how do you apply that value in the context of real world things like making tough business decisions, and does that metrics have meaning to the owner of it? Or to somebody who's trying to measure things. I do know one area we need to focus on is measuring progress over outcomes. We all know security isn't a case where you say, oh, we're secure now, we got these measurements, look what it showed us, we're there. And oh, by the way, the dynamic and landscape is changing constantly. And it's almost like the analogy is pilots, and you think about individuals, you certify pilots. Well, whenever they change equipment, right, they go through an entire development process, lots of time in simulators before they get to be the guy flying the airplane. And then when they're flying the airplane, they have to go back through and qualify through simulators and get certified in the simulator environments on contingencies on the new equipment. Well, we constantly change equipment. Luckily for us, physics is still physics, like airplane physics, but how we interact with that technology and what people demonstrate is possible changes too. So we have a great rate of change. So the key to the measurement, it's just a great question, how you know you've arrived. I think there's a couple things. If you measure progress in terms of your maturity, it's like a maturity curve. I think that's a part of it. Progress also is knowing that you can look at it in terms of the decisions you made when you try to contract or hire somebody. Was I able to make that decision very quickly? And then I can qualitatively decide, was that a successful engagement? Did I get what I need? were they able to deliver the job? Right now, I could just tell you, being a former CSO and still having lots of colleagues that are CSOs, it is an extremely painful exercise. There's more disappointment than anyone wants to admit. And a lot more work goes into making a decision to spend a couple of dollars and invest in somebody, and there's a lot of disappointment, so.
And with the testing, with the standards that are out there, and I'm not picking on SEP 1.0 and the 2.0 that's coming out, but there's a lot of implementations using SEP 1.0. We've tested against it. We do know that there's issues. 2.0 is coming out. Well, how do you do that migration to SEP 2.0, 2.x, whatever it will be? And what do you do with those old environments that can't move off of one? You know, are they still going to be certified for passing security? Yes or no? And I can't answer yes or no because I don't know the environments. But same thing as standards advance. Are we going to say, yes, it was tested in this environment with this standard, with this version, and this draft coming out? Well, what happens a year later when that new draft has been passed? That's still, again, up in the air and an unknown that has to be talked about and discussed.
Mr. Highfield.
So I really like the messages, the message especially, Mike, from you earlier about we have to be in this learning mode. Also recognize that testing and certification are something that all too often I see us today using as the shield to hide behind. Okay, I've got the gold star. What else do you want from me? And also, putting this together with a conversation that I had with Mr. Goodspeed earlier these couple days, where, I asked him actually if he'd looked at Smart Energy Profile 2.0 yet, and he's like, "Are there products?" And so there's a security community, research community that starts tearing stuff apart when they have stuff to tear apart.
Right.
So how do we actually create this? How do we actually create this ecosystem, this environment where we're not setting ourselves up on the on top of the White Castle,
right.
And yet we have this feedback loop that works and that doesn't involve 60 minutes and that gets us down the road in a productive manner.
Yeah.
That's a great, tough question. You hit on something that I feel strongly about this.
Was it White Castles? Because that's what I heard.
Yeah, I heard White. Yeah, I feel strongly about that. I know you don't get White Castle. The technicals. The idea of technical standards. That's one frustration I have is watching technical standards that develop that still have theoretical technology decisions in them that don't have a demonstration associated where no one can go look and kick the tires and say, wait a minute, does that really even work? I mean, in some cases we even say, here's the targets and here's the approaches, and no one defines an approach to get to the approach. They go, yeah, you're going to do something like that over here. We know these are the objectives. And the problem is Travis has nothing to sink his teeth into. No one looks at it. We kind of try to engineer towards it. And eventually someone gets something there and they say, well, this is technical, this meets the technical standard. It does what the standard called for. And then everyone's surprised and says, well, what do you mean that it doesn't deliver? There's other security concerns associated with it as an example. So that's a tough process. That's why I say testing and certification are different concepts. I would love to see a technical standard always have to live to a referenced, if you want to say architecture or system model that could either be tested in a lab environment or in the real world. Say, show us how you're going to get to that. And in some cases, there are standards that exist that no one's done it yet. I mean, here's the standard, and we think it's possible. One, no one's paid for it because they don't want that capability or feature yet, but it's in the family of standards. Those are things that always kind of boggle my mind.
And it also comes back to a domain of trust model of, as you're bringing in vendors to test, how much it is going to get disclosed, how can we bring in that new technology, start integrating it into our product, yet test as we're going. a lot of enterprises, and even the manufacturers, aren't at the point of making sure security is integrated into that complete development life cycle so that they can test all the way through, which would solve part of the problem. But yes, there are not manufacturers and vendors out there that are saying, here's my product, add a new feature to it, and we'll produce it without any testing. Oh, yeah, right. That domain of trust model has to be rebuilt in that, yes, we can bring in somebody or have internal staff, help and work with R&D as we're integrating this new technology.
Darren, I thought you were supposed to get the car running. I'm running with you to the airport. I'm kidding.
I was going to say, when I was talking to, I work with chip makers, and one chip maker that was here yesterday after he met Travis, and I know Travis had a device that happens to have a chip that this chip maker makes, and it's a security module. I said, Travis is going to go after that chip, and he says, bring it on. And I said, is that being, braggadocious or whatever? He goes, no. He goes, that's actually the best security testing we ever see. Literally, he said, people like him going after stuff, that's how our security gets better. So, that's interesting. I mean, is there any way we could formalize that process, or is that really always going to be the method of choice,
I don't think we can clone some of those people that have the free thinking brain. I don't think we
Evil
can clone
bit?
them yet. No, I can't say evil bit,
Yeah,
but that creative thinking person.
Formalize good speed.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's a good point.
As Travis says,
but
I'm just
that's-
having fun,
but-
neighbor.
But there's an important thing through system testing that when I was involved with it, in more of a traditional control system context, but every test, and you realize this, right? There's scoping objectives, and some people call them different things, but if you want to call them targets to evaluate, it's usually a discussion, where the supplier says, well, here, I've got this, and especially when it's a system, when it's a component, sometimes it's a little easier, but when it's a system, it's, what do you want to look at? Well, I like you to look here, and how much time do you get? And everyone has constraints of budget and time, and then just the access to the skill set. And so, but some of the most valuable was always to reserve, and the testing teams that I like the best, always reserve some free time, where the cybersecurity researcher got to define what they wanted to do. And it's a very informal test when you get down to what they want to do, because no one wrote down the rules that we're going to go test this. 90% test was categorized, and you left 10% open. And that was really important, because the creativity was important, because everyone brought this idea of why I wanted something tested, because I have a value and I'm worried about this or that, without leaving some of that space open to freedom to be able to say, well, wait a minute, you're not worried about this, and maybe you should have been, because look what happened over here. So with testing, it's very hard culture, because when we test, we want to define the test, but remember, we bring a bias to why we define the test. And for the Travis Goodspeeds of the world, letting them have some freedom, just funding them to have time to experiment, sometimes it can give you your greatest results.
Well, on that note, it's 3:59. You can keep going if you like.
He's got to go.
Any last questions from anyone in the audience?
I only have a 3-year-old at Disney World waiting for me right now, so I don't think we have any last questions, do we?
You want to stop it?
I think that's a threat.
Well, on that note, thank you very much to our panelists. Let's give them a hand.
Take this.